Hi ladies, this is lesson 8.5. This is Mrs. Blaufuss here, and in this lesson we're looking at adding and subtracting rational expressions. So our rational expressions, they look like fractions, but they are polynomial expressions in the numerator and denominator. So you have a new vocab term here. This is a complex fraction, and a complex fraction is a fraction that has another fraction in either the numerator and or the denominator. So it's like a fraction over a fraction. You can always simplify complex fractions because a complex fraction can always be simplified to a simple fraction where you have a polynomial in the numerator and a polynomial in the denominator. So let's look at a couple examples as far as adding and subtracting fractions with like denominators. Remember, when you multiply fractions, you multiply the numerator by the and you multiply the denominators, but when you add fractions, you keep the denominator. So when you add fractions here, a over c plus b over c equals a plus b over c. Your denominator stays the same. When you subtract fractions, same thing, you need a common denominator. A over c minus b over c is a minus b over c. So let's look at this first example. We have a common denominator here, 6x. So we keep our denominator, 6x, and then we add our numerators, which is 9 plus 2. So to simplify that, we have 11 over 6x. So that was adding with like denominators, but now if we add or subtract with unlike denominators, we need to somehow get a common denominator. Remember that you can always multiply by 1, so any number over itself is equal to 1. And when you multiply fractions, you multiply the numerator and you multiply the denominator. So in these next examples, we're going to look for what's called the least common denominator. And you're going to have to factor out your denominators and look for any common terms you have, and then whatever you have to multiply those common terms in order to get common denominators. So here we're going to add with unlike denominators. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor my fractions. So 5 over 4x squared is the same as 5 over 2x squared. Well, actually 5 over 2x times 5 over 2x. And sometimes it helps to factor the larger polynomial first. And then I'm going to factor my second polynomial, which is the same as x plus 1 over 2x times x plus 2. Okay, 2x squared, if I factor out a 2x from both of those terms, I'm left with x plus 2. All right, now I need to identify my least common denominator. So my least common denominator, I have a 2x in both of these already, but then I have terms in both other denominators that are not common. So I have a 2x in this denominator and an x plus 2 over here. So my least common denominator is the least common multiple of my two denominators, which in this case is 2x times 2x times x plus 2. Okay, so now I'm going to take my fractions, my factored terms. So I have 5 over 2x times 2x plus x plus 1 over 2x times x plus 2. All right, now I want these to be my least, I want both of these denominators to be my least common denominator. So remember, you can always multiply by 1. Any number over itself is 1. So I'm going to multiply both of these by 2x. I'm going to multiply my first fraction by 2x over 2, or by, actually not 2x, by x plus 2 over x plus 2. Okay, so now my denominator is 2x, 2x, x plus 2. My numerator changes too, but really what I'm focusing on is getting my common denominator. In my second term, I have a 2x already, and I have an x plus 2, so I need to multiply by 2x over 2x. That is the term that's missing from my denominator. So now when I add these two terms together, I have 5 times x plus 2 plus x plus 1 times 2x all over my least common denominator of 2x times 2x times x plus 2. Now, keep in mind that when you are simplifying, you have to have a common term in all terms. So even though I have an x plus 2 in my numerator and denominator, I do not have an x plus 2 here in this term, so I cannot simplify. Okay, so I can put this into standard form, but you cannot just cancel out those common terms because you're not multiplying in your numerator. Okay, so now we can simplify our numerator and we can put our denominator into standard form. So our numerator is 5x plus 10 plus 2x squared plus 2x. I'm multiplying here, and that's all over 4x squared times x plus 2. And I can simplify this then even further by combining like terms and putting my denominator into standard form. So 2x squared plus 7x plus 10 all over 4x cubed plus 8x squared. And that's my final answer. No common terms in every term in the numerator and every term in the denominator, so that's where I'm going to stop. Right, let's look at the second example where we're subtracting with unlike denominators. When we subtract with unlike denominators, remember we're subtracting this whole polynomial. So let's start again by factoring, just like we did before. So factor our first term. So that's 7 divided by 3 over x minus 3 minus this whole quantity, x plus 4 over x plus 3 times x minus 3. And then we need to identify our least common denominator. So we do have a common factor in both of our denominators, and that's x minus 3. And then we have an uncommon factor in the denominators. So here's our least common denominator. So we need to look at our first term, 7 over 3 times x minus 3. And in order to get our denominator to be what our least common denominator is, we need to multiply by x plus 3 over x plus 3. And then we're subtracting x plus 4 over x plus 3, x minus 3. And again, we want to get our least common denominator. So we already have an x minus 3. We already have an x plus 3. So we need to multiply by 3 over 3, which is 1. We can always multiply by 1. And then we can add our numerator, or in this case, subtract our numerators. So we know that our common denominator is 3 times x plus 3 times x minus 3. And our numerator is 7 times x plus 3 minus the whole quantity x plus 4 times 3. Okay, so remember to follow order of operations, do multiplication first, and then subtraction. So now we can simplify this by combining any like terms and multiplying out. So we have 7x plus 21 minus the whole quantity, 3x. So if you need to write it in parentheses, fine, do that. So 3x plus 12. So we're subtracting that quantity, 3x plus 12. So we have 7x plus 21 minus 3x minus 12, all over 3 times x plus 3 times x minus 3. Now we can simplify by combining any like terms that we have. So 7x minus 3x is 4x. 21 minus 12 is 9. So 4x over 9, and then we can multiply out our denominator. Which is 3 times x squared minus 9. So that's 3x squared minus 27. And that's our final answer because there are no common factors in each term between the numerator and the denominator. Again, you see an x in the numerator and you see an x squared in the denominator, but that's not a common term in, it doesn't have 9, negative 9 does not have an x value in it, and the 27 does not have an x value in it, so you cannot just cancel out those x values. 4x minus 9 over 3x squared minus 27 is simplest form. Okay, so try this one on your own. You can pause the video while you work and unpause for the solution. Solution for this first problem, 8x minus 7 over 3 plus x, and that is your simplest form. Okay, try this next one. Here you're adding with like denominators, so pause while you work and you can unpause for the solution. Remember to simplify. So in simplest form, our solution here is 5 divided by x. All right, now try this one where you're adding with uncommon denominators. You can pause while you work, unpause for the solution. Your first step is to factor those denominators and find the least common denominator. So your least common denominator is x plus 3 times x plus 3 times x minus 3. So you have to multiply your first fraction by x minus 3 over x minus 3. You have to multiply your second fraction by x plus 3 over x plus 3. Then you have your common denominator, so you can add your numerators. Once you've added your numerators, your last step then is just to simplify. So by combining like terms, putting it in standard form, and then putting your denominator also in standard form. So then really when you multiply your common denominator, you have your denominator is x cubed plus 3x squared minus 9x minus 27. And then your numerator, x squared plus 4x plus 15, once you combine all like terms. All right, now try this last on your own. And this one, you are subtracting. You're subtracting here. So that's that whole quantity that you're subtracting. And you need to find your least common denominator. So pause the video while you work, and then you can unpause for the solution. So your first step is to find your least common denominator. You have to factor both denominators, and you're looking for anything common, any common factors in those denominators. So your first denominator is 4x times x. Your second denominator is 4x times 2x minus 3. So your least common denominator is the common one, which is 4x, and then the uncommon ones, x and 2x minus 3. So in order to get our least common denominator in the denominator of both of those terms, we need to multiply the first fraction by 2x minus 3 over 2x minus 3, and the second fraction by x over x. And then in both terms, we have our least common denominator. Right, so now we have our least common denominator in both of those terms, and so we just need to subtract our numerators. So next we just have to simplify our numerator and put it in standard form, and put our denominator in standard form. And our final answer is negative x squared minus 14x minus 24 over 8x cubed minus 12x squared. There are no common factors in every single term in the numerator and denominator, so this is our simplest form, and it's in standard form, so that is our final answer. So this is it for the first part of lesson 8.5. I'm going to shoot a second video, and that'll deal with the complex fractions. So please jot down any questions you have for this part, and we can address them in class when I see you. Thanks.